محمد وآل محمد وعجل. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض ملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يمتنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة وينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي الصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. we ask permission from Mullah Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Another Jum'ah has passed us, and we have been mahroom from Ziyarat Mullah. And this Jum'ah and this Friday, which we are gathered together to start the Majlis Az-Zahra for Rasulullah, Imam Hasan Mushtaba, and Samri Rabayat, Imam Ali ibn Musa Raza. We have, with husn, we have to accept the fact that, inshallah, Imam Mahdi Ajalallah Ta'ala Farajah will bless our meetings and our gathering, and we say tasliyat and condolences to Imam Mahdi fi musibati jaddik, Imam and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of the Holy Prophet and his holy family, please recite the second salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the reappearance of our awaited Savior, please recite the third salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For tonight, inshallah ta'ala, I have a salam and marcia for the two tragedies that have befallen the family of the Holy Prophet, peace be on him and his family. The first is a salam for Imam Hasan Mushtaba alayhi salatu wassalam, and the second is a marcia for the shahadat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, बरपा है अहले बैत में महशर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, जादा निहाय शाह को आखिर किया शहीद, जादा निहाय शाह को आखिर किया शहीद, पानी के साथ जहर मिलाकर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, क्या वाक़या गज़ब का मदीने में हो गया, क्या वाक़या गज़ब का मदीने में हो गया, हिलती है आज ख़ब्रे पैगंबर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, कासिम यतीम होता है बिन भाई के हुसैन, कासिम यतीम होता है बिन भाई के हुसैन, कहती है रो के ज़ैनब मुज़तर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, रूहे बतूल खाक उड़ाती है लाश पर, रूहे बतूल खाक उड़ाती है लाश पर, सर पीटते हैं फातेह खैबर हुसैनियों, लख्ते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों, ताबूत पर हसन के चढ़ाते हैं अशकिया, ताबूत पर हसन के चढ़ाते हैं अशकिया, फूलों के बदले की चादर हुसैनियों, लखते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों। इल्मी की मगफिरत की दुआ कीजिए जरूर, इल्मी की मगफिरत की दुआ कीजिए जरूर। बहरे हसन व बहरे पैगंबर हुसैनियों, लखते जिगर उगलते हैं शब्बर हुसैनियों। बरपा है अहले बैत में महशर हुसैनियों। सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद। ऐ मोमिनो यसरब में अजब नौहगरी है, ज़हरा के लिए दाग गम बेपिदरी है। लब खुश्क है, मुंह जर्द है, आंखों में तरी है। पैगंबर कौनैन चिरागे सहरी, पैगंबर कौनैन चिरागे सहरी है। होते हैं जुदा खैर बशर खैरून निसा से, महबूब खुदा छूटते हैं शेर खुदा, महबूब खुदा छूटते हैं शेर खुदा से। जिसका कलमा पढ़ते हैं सब मोमिने दीदार, अब आजिम फिरदौस है वो खासे गफ्फार। मक्के में मदीने में तबाही के हैं आसार, अब होते हैं उम्मत से जुदा अहमद मो, अब होते हैं उम्मत से जुदा अहमद मुख्तार। फाके किए गमगीर है दुनिया के सफर में, आखिर सफर मर्ग किया माए सफर, आखिर सफर मर्ग किया माए सफर में। एक काफिराने गोश्त में था जहर खिलाया, उस जहर ने आखिर ये असर अपना दिखाया। मौला को सरे बिस्तरे आजार गिराया, हिस्से में हसन के वही जहरे सितमा, हिस्से में हसन के वही जहरे सितमाया। कमजोर किया तपने रसूले अरबी को, ताकत न रही बैठने उठने की नबी, ताकत न रही बैठने उठने की नबी को। है आखिरी इस वक्त मेरा आवाज़ो नसीहत, अब मिंबरो मेहराब से होता हूँ मैं रुखसत। आना था मिनल्लाह इलल्लाह है रहलत, अब होगी मुलाकात मेरी रोज़े क़यामत, अब होगी मुलाकात मेरी रोज़े क़यामत। तुम गम में मेरे नालो फरियाद करोगे, इमसाल मुझे हज में बहुत याद करो, इमसाल मुझे हज में बहुत याद करो। ये दो चीजें मैं छोड़े हुए जाता हूँ मगर हाँ, वो एक तो मेरी आल है और एक है कुरान। कुरान की हाफिज मेरी इतरत है निगहबान, ये दोनों बुजुर्गी वो फजीलत में है एक, ये दोनों बुजुर्गी वो फजीलत में है एक सा। कुरान तो तुम सबकी तिलावत के लिए है और आल पैगंबर की हिदायत के लिए, और आल पैगंबर की हिदायत के लिए है। गर बाद मेरे पहुंचेगा जहरा को कुछ आजार, मरखत से मेरी पुश्त नहीं लगने की जिन्हार। ये चार बुजुर्ग आले पैगंबर है खबरदार, ज़हरा हुसैन हसन हैदर कर्रार। वाजिब मेरे अस्हाब पर इन सब की विला है यारो, यही तबलीग रिसालत का सिला, यारो यही तबलीग रिसालत का सिला है। फारिग जो हुआ वहां से वो आशिक दावर, फिर घर में गए और गिरे फर्श अजल पर, उज़रों से तशरीफ ना फिर ले गए बाहर। बस खबर में जाने को उठे वहां से पया, बस खबर में जाने को उठे वहां से पया बर। हैरानो परेशानो दिल अफसुर्दा थी ज़हरा, बाबा भी जीता था मगर मुर्दा थी ज़हरा, बाबा भी जीता था मगर मुर्दा थी ज़हरा। पर अहमद मुख्तार थे जब होश में आते, ज़हरा को बसद यास कलेजे से लगा गए प्यार से ये दोनों नवासों को सुनाते। मैं अच्छा हूं तुम किस लिए खाना नहीं खा, मैं अच्छा हूं तुम किस लिए खाना नहीं खाते। वो कहते थे क्या खाक तमन्नाएं ग़िज़ा हो, अल्लाह करे जल्द कहीं तुमको शिफा, अल्लाह करे जल्द कहीं तुमको शिफा हो। शेख कहते थे सेहत हो न हो खाना तो खा लो, नाना के नवासो दिले मुस्तर को संभालो। चिल्लाती थी ज़हरा के ना ये जिक्र निकालो, बाबा मेरे फर्जंदों को दूल्हा तो बना, बाबा मेरे फर्जंदों को दूल्हा तो बना लो। अरे मान था तुमको तो नवासों की दुल्हन का क्या ब्याह न देखोगे, हुसैन और हसन का क्या ब्याह न देखोगे, हुसैन और हसन का। एक आह की रोने लगे और गश हुए मौला, दरवाजे से नागा सदा ये हुई पैदा, दो इज़्न हुजूर है हरमे सैयद वाला। जाकर कहा ज़हरा ने के बेहोश है बा, जाकर कहा ज़हरा ने के बेहोश है बाबा। फिर आई निदा फिर वही फरमा गई ज़हरा, पर तीसरी आवाज में थर्रा गई ज़हरा, पर तीसरी आवाज में थर्रा गई ज़हरा। फुर्सत जो हुई गश से तो हजरत ने भी पूछा, ज़हरा ने कहा एक अरब आया है तन्हा, वो मांगता है इज़्न हुजूर है मेरे बाबा। कितना ही किया उज़्र नहीं उसको पजीर, कितना ही किया उज़्र नहीं उसको पजीरा। हजरत ने कहा ये मलकुल मौत है ज़हरा, हंगा मेरी जीज़ का फौत है ज़हरा, हंगा मेरी जीज़ का फौत है ज़हरा। ये इज़्न किसी से भी नहीं मांगता वल्लाह, पर हाँ मेरे दरवाजे के रुतबे से है आगा। अल्लाह रे अज़्ज़ो शरफ सैयद जीजा, बेहुक्म न घर में मलकुल मौत को थी, बेहुक्म न घर में मलकुल मौत को थी रा। पर करबो बला में यही घर था, यही दर था, कुफार का अम्बो था आतिश का गुजर, कुफार का अम्बो था आतिश का गुजर था। सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद व अज्जिल फरज।
Brother Mahbub, you want to recite some salam?
Inshallah. But Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll just recite little salam on the Masahib of Bibi Sakina Salamullah alaiha. माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, उठ घर को चले खुल गया जिंदान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, बूंदे जो तेरे शिम्र ने छीने वो दिला दूं, एक नन्ही सी चादर में तेरे सर पे उड़ा दूं, घर जाने का अब हो गया सामान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मासूम से गालों पे तमाचे भी है खाए, रो रो के कहा करती थी बाबा नहीं आए, रोता है तेरे हाल पे जिंदान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, एक बार मेरे सीने से लग जा जरा उठ कर, और कहती थी ये माँ कब्र सकीना से लिपट कर, कुछ देर के हैं हम तेरे मेहमान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, उठती ही नहीं लाख उठाया है कई बार, लो मर ही गई आज वो बाबा की अज़ादार, लब खोल जरा माँ है परेशान सकीना, माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना, रोने की सदा आती है जिंदान से अक्सर, मर के भी रिहाई न मिली है जिसे अख्तर सुनसान सा है आज क्यों जिंदान सकीना माँ कहती थी उठ जाग मेरी जान सकीना उठ घर को चले खुल गया जिंदान सकीना और मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Allah, Sheikh Rastani will be joining us soon. But just quick reminders for our regular programs. Dua Tabassul on Tuesdays. So far we're doing it 8:30. And there's some question about we should move it to 8 o'clock or keep it 8:30. So if you guys can voice your opinions to move it to 8 o'clock or we continue at 8:30. Dua Kumel, we every Thursday on 8 o'clock. Now next Majlis is for the Shahadat of Imam Hasan Askari. Depending on the moon signing, it will be either Sunday or Monday next weekend, inshallah. So tomorrow is 29th. We'll find out about moon sighting and then we will make the announcement when will be Majlis for Imam Hasan Askari Shahadat, whether it will be Sunday or Monday. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
I think he's joining now. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much.
So we are ready whenever you're ready.
Okay, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the hastening and the return of our beloved 12th Imam, please recite a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli
ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
farajahum. First and foremost, my condolences on these three shahadats that we are going through of the Prophet, of Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba, and Ali ibn Musa Rida salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'een. Tonight's topic that we will be discussing is the topic of the akhlaq that we have when we are interacting with those around us. This is a topic and an issue that you find at the very forefront of the mission of the Prophet salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Meaning that from the time that the Prophet started his mission, from the time that he became a prophet and he started to spread the message of Islam, you find that amongst his foremost goals, amongst the biggest things that he had in mind, was to create a community, that this community would interact with one another with the proper akhlaq. And therefore, if you had the opportunity one day to meet the Prophet and to ask the Prophet what was the reason why he spread the message of Islam, why did he start this whole movement, why did he start this whole mission? If you had the opportunity to ask the Prophet of that one day, you would find that the Prophet would answer something like this, because according to some narrations, there is a line that is attributed to the Prophet that he said this, and he introduced the purpose of his message like this, that when they asked him why he started to spread the message of Islam, he said, "Inni bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq," that I was sent as a prophet to perfect the character of the human being, to perfect the characteristics, and amongst them the akhlaq of the human being. So this lies at the very forefront of the message and the mission of the Prophet salawatullahi alayhi. And what you also find in the seerah of the Prophet and Imam al-Hasan is that their akhlaq was one of those main things that was pushing the message of Islam and spreading the message of Islam initially, maybe even more than the actual message and the actual teachings of the religion of Islam. As we read in this verse that we just recited at the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, if people did not see the kind heart that you have, if it wasn't for people seeing how kind you are, لَنْ فَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, they would have left you, no matter how true your message is, no matter how divine your message is. If you had not delivered it with the best of akhlaq, the people would have left you. They would have turned away from your message. And it was because of our mercy and our blessing that you have an akhlaq, that the Quran says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have the best of akhlaq. You have the akhlaq that draws everyone closer to it. You also find this in the seerah of Imam al-Hasan. They say a day he was passing by a group of people, and a group of poor people, impoverished. They were sitting on the ground outside of the houses of people. They were eating. They were having a meal outside. They say when Imam al-Hasan came and passed by this group of people, they asked Imam al-Hasan to come and sit with them. And Imam al-Hasan, with the best of akhlaq, he accepted their invitation. He did not see it as humiliation for himself to go and sit with the poor and eat with the poor. He went and he sat with them and he ate with them. And when he was done, he said, now that I have accepted your offer, now it is time for you to accept my offer. Then Imam al-Hasan invited them to his own house, and he had fed them in his own house as well. So you see the akhlaq of the Prophet, you see the akhlaq of Imam al-Hasan and our other Imams as well. This all on one side. On the other side, we have to remember the environment and the atmosphere in which the Prophet was introduced. The Arab of the time of the Prophet, they did not have the best of akhlaq. They did not spend time and interact with one another in the best of ways. In fact, when you look at the time that the Prophet presented himself and his message, you find that his message was presented at a time where the akhlaq that the Prophet was talking about was extraordinary. It was not normal. This was a group of people who used to kill their own daughters, and the Prophet took them from that point and he taught them that the daughter is the blessing in your house. These were individuals who used to not care for their mothers. They used to not value their mothers. And the Prophet taught them that heaven lies beneath the feet of your mother. And these were individuals and people who, if they found someone who was lonely, who was gharib, who had no one else to turn to, if he was a guest in their city, they used to rob him. They used to take everything that he had. And the Prophet taught them that ad-dayfu mahbubullah, that a dayf, someone who is a guest, is beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tonight, inshallah, we want to take some time to delve into this topic and understand this concept of good akhlaq from a deeper perspective, from the perspective of the Quran and the Hadith, because having good akhlaq, of course, is something that you don't need to be a Muslim to know about and to know that it's a good thing, but Islam gives us a different perspective with regards to it. And in order to do that, we will pose the following questions, inshallah. Number one, when we talk about having good akhlaq and we say that the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt had impeccable akhlaq, what did this good akhlaq look like? Did it mean that they used to sit there and have a smile on their face 24/7? Or did the meaning of them having good akhlaq was something else that would show itself in their day-to-day lives? Number two, what is the reward of someone who has good akhlaq? And what is the punishment of the one who has bad akhlaq, specifically within his family and with his loved ones? Number three, in what situations does Islam expect us to not only have good akhlaq, but to have impeccable akhlaq, to have the type of akhlaq that is perfect? What are those situations that Islam says if you do not have good akhlaq in these situations, not only you are doing something wrong, what you are doing is terrible. It's detrimental to Islam that you have this type of akhlaq. Number four, which of the companions of the Ahlul Bayt was it that when he wanted to debate with the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt and he started to yell at them and he started to be harsh with them, that the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt turned to him and said, listen, if you're going to debate us, that's fine, but debate us with the akhlaq of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Debate us like Ja'far ibn Muhammad debates us. And number five, in the last question, what does Islam tell me and teach me about a situation where I show good akhlaq towards someone, I show kindness towards someone, but that person does not return the favor. That person does not show good akhlaq back to me. What am I supposed to do in these situations? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into the answers to these questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Let's begin from here. The first thing that we have to remember when we talk about the good akhlaq of the Prophet, of the Ahlul Bayt, is that we have to remember that the Prophet, he came into an environment where good akhlaq did not even make sense. He came into an environment where the rights of a family member, the rights of women, the rights of children, even the rights of other men in the way you interact with them, this was not an understood concept. This was a concept that was new to the culture at that time. So when the Prophet was introducing these concepts, he was introducing things that were extraordinary. They were not normal. They were not ordinary. Yes, they were things that were even more than what the people of that time had heard of. They didn't even know what the Prophet was doing. At times, today when they talk about women's rights, they talk about the right of children. Yes, we understand what these things, though we may not agree with all of the things that are considered to be the rights of women, considered to be the rights of men, considered to be the rights of children. We may not agree on the details of this, but the concepts we already know, the concepts we already understand. During the time of the Prophet, the rights of a child, of having good akhlaq with your child, was not even understood. And this is why in the life of the Prophet, when he used to show this good akhlaq, when it came to Hasan and Hussein, salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhima, you find that the people of that time, they didn't even understand what the Prophet is doing. On one occasion, they say the Prophet, he walked into one of the alleys of the city of Medina, and the moment he entered into this alley, he saw a group of children, they are playing. When he saw these children playing, he saw amongst them that his grandchild, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, is also amongst them. He is playing. And so he approached Imam al-Hussein to kiss him, to embrace him. This is his grandchild, of course, and also one that he wants to show the Muslims that they are to respect him. And the hadith says that the more he tried to go and get Imam al-Hussein and embrace him and hug him, Imam al-Hussein, being a child, started to run around, right? He started to move away from the Prophet. And then they say the Prophet started to run after Imam al-Hussein, to embrace him, to hug him, to kiss him. And the Arab who were watching this, they said, look, this is who our Prophet is. a 50-year-old man. The Prophet is now a full-grown man at this point. He's not a youth at this point, yes? This is a full-grown man. This is in Medina. This is 13 years plus 40 years. This is in his 50s. They said, look, this is our Prophet. He's a man who's running around a child to kiss him and embrace him. In some of the ahadith, we read that this man, when the Prophet used to kiss his grandchildren, this man used to say, you know what? I never kiss my child. I never kiss my daughter. And the Prophet famously said, Man la yarham, la yurham. The first point to keep in mind is when the Prophet used to introduce these concepts, these were not concepts that were familiar to people. These were extraordinary things. These are things that people had never heard about. And therefore, the Prophet, what he was doing was groundbreaking. Then when you look at the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt and you want to understand what this good akhlaq actually looked like in their day-to-day lives, you find that there is a particular element of it that many times we don't pay attention to. We might think having good akhlaq means you sit there and you just smile 24/7, which is actually kind of scary if you think about it, if someone is constantly smiling. This is not the way the Ahlul Bayt had good akhlaq. This was a portion of it. Smiling is a part of it. Another part of it is what you see in the seerah of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi. We've heard this famous story that Ali ibn Abi Talib, after he had become Khalifa, one day he was on his way and he was outside of the city of Kufa and he was returning back to the city of Kufa. And on his way back, he bumped into this old Jewish man. He ran into this old Jewish man who was also on his way towards Kufa, but he wasn't going to Kufa itself. He was going to a village outside of Kufa. And so they started to go together. They started to move together and they acquainted one another on this path. And the narration says that Ali ibn Abi Talib on this path, he started to speak to this old Jewish man. And the conversation was so warm. The conversation was so welcoming that they moved beyond the path where the path to Kufa and the path to this village now separated from one another. And this old Jewish man, at one point he realizes, he turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib and said, Ya Ali, you were going to Kufa, you were not coming to our village. You forgot to move towards your own destination. And Ali ibn Abi Talib turned to him, he said, no, I did not forget. But I am a person who essentially sends off my guests. I send off my acquaintance. I see them away. I knew that you were going and I wanted to walk towards your destination and then return back. And this man said, well, do you do this because it is your personal preference or is this something that your Prophet has taught you? And Ali ibn Abi Talib said, no, our Prophet has taught us to send away, to do badraqah of our relative or our guest when they are with us. And then this Jewish man says, fine, that's wonderful, this is great. And he said goodbye to Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he went to his village and Ali ibn Abi Talib returned back to the city of Kufa. The narration states that the next day or a couple days later, this old Jewish man came into the city of Kufa. And he came to the masjid, which was the center of everything happening. He came into this masjid and he saw everyone is gathered around Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he looked over the shoulders and said, who is this? They said, you don't know who this is? This is Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the Khalifa. This is Amirul Mu'mineen. And he said, oh, this is Amirul Mu'mineen? The man who was walking with this old Jewish man. He saw me off to go to my city and then he came back. This is Amirul Mu'mineen. I will then embrace the religion of Islam because of the akhlaq of Amirul Mu'mineen. Now, what we understand from this story, of course, is that you send off somebody, you see somebody off as they're going to their city. But even more important than this is this, that imagine how warm and welcoming the conversation was between Ali ibn Abi Talib and an old Jewish man, that when they were walking together, this old Jewish man forgot about the differences in the paths. He was so engaged in this conversation, and that is the key word, engaging, being welcoming, having warm conversations with people. He was so engaged in this conversation with Ali ibn Abi Talib that he forgot that the paths are going on different ways. Imagine how much in common do Ali ibn Abi Talib have with the old Jewish man? Maybe not so much, but the conversation was so warm and welcoming. And this is the part of the akhlaq of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt that we don't pay attention to. Engaging with one another. You see this in our centers sometimes. When someone enters and they are new in the community, how often do you see that all of a sudden everyone sits away from this person? How often do you see that no one comes to say salam to this person? No one comes to welcome this individual. No one comes to make this person feel welcome in the center. God forbid this person doesn't speak the ethnic language that we have. Yes? Imagine it's an Iranian center, for example. This is just an example. Yes? People are speaking Farsi. This person speaks English, for example. It's a Urdu speaking center majority wise. Yes? Then do people come to speak to this person as well? To give him the feeling that he is welcome, that he should be part of the community as well? How many times do we find this, that a person will go, they will attend the center, and then when they come back, they say, I was sitting there for an hour. Nobody approached me to tell me anything. Nobody said, Salaam alaikum, welcome. Are you new to the community? What's going on? How can we help you? Nobody engaged in a conversation with me. This is not the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt were warm and welcoming when you were around them. The hadith of the sixth Imam says, when the believers, they come and they meet with one another, they have, and this concept is mentioned in our hadith, they have i'tilaf, they have ulfa. Ulfa means when you connect on an emotional level with somebody. They connect with one another. They become acquaintances of one another. And he says the mu'mineen, they connect with one another faster than the time it takes for the water from the sky to mix with the water on the ground. When it rains, the water hits the ground, it only takes a split second for the water from the sky to mix with the water on the ground. Imam Sadiq says the mu'mineen, their hearts connect with one another this quickly. And then he says the fujjar, the wrongdoers, the sinners, they are such that their hearts do not connect with one another. Even if they spend hours of time with one another, their hearts do not connect with one another. He uses this analogy. He says they are like cattle, like the cow and the sheep that go up into the hills to graze on the grass, and they spend the whole day together, but this one never cares about the day of the other one. This one never cares about how the day of the other one went, the concerns of the other one, how this person is struggling. They don't care about any of this, because he says they do not connect with one another. But the mu'mineen, they connect with one another, engaging with brothers and sisters, having warm and welcoming conversations. Sometimes you will have a person, you'll sit in a majlis alongside a person, before the majlis starts, you sit with this person, say, Assalamu alaikum, brother, how are you doing? This person, instead of being warm, instead of being welcoming, Assalamu alaikum, and then he turns away. You have to wait another 5 minutes before you can ask this person what he does, how he's part of this community, what's going on. Brother, what do you do? I'm an engineer. Another 5 minutes before you can ask him another question. This was not the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. The seerah of the Ahlul Bayt was that they were warm and welcoming, that they would engage in conversation with one another, and they would show their good akhlaq in this way. One of the great maraja, I don't want to mention his name, his students and his family members say that he was a very busy person, but he would have appointments with his relatives and his own family members, with his grandchildren, with his children who would bring their grandchildren along with them. He's a busy person, but he would have slots of time throughout the day where he could visit. And his relatives say, his family members say, that whenever we used to go and visit Imam Khomeini, and I mentioned his name, whenever we used to go and visit Imam Khomeini, every time we would go and visit, we could never tell which of the relatives he likes most. We could never tell who is it that he loves the most, because he was so warm and welcoming with all of us. We could never tell who is his favorite. Engaging, being kind, even cracking a joke or two. These are part of the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. We have a hadith about a person who just jokes with another person that they are acquainted with. Yes? Specifically, if you're going to be acquainted with this person for long amounts of time, there's hadith that it's mustahab. The happiness that you bring to the face of another believer. Take a look at the hadith and the rewards that are mentioned for someone who brings happiness to the heart of another believer. This element of good akhlaq is something that is missing from us. Then when you look at the punishment of the one who has bad akhlaq, you find that the punishment is also a very severe punishment as well. When you look at the ahadith, you find the story of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh was a famous companion of the Prophet salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi. And he was one who was amongst the foremost Muslims. He was amongst those who believed in Islam before the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina. And in fact, he was amongst those who got the grounds ready for the Prophet to migrate and from the Prophet to come to the city of Medina. You can say maybe that all of us are in debt to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. What happened to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh? And he was amongst those who took part in the early battles of Islam as well. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, after years, he passed away, and the news came to the Prophet salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi. They say the Prophet left his house, and this time, normally he would walk and he would be calm and he would be collected, but this time he was walking very fast and he was in a rush. And they asked him, they looked at Ya Rasulullah, you know, you're walking so fast, and they saw the Prophet is not calm and collected like he normally is. And the hadith says he walked so fast that the abba fell from his shoulders, but he did not wait to pick it up. And he continued. And they raised the body of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh to go and place him in the grave, to do tashyi' of the body of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. And they say when they did that, and the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed the salat for him and they put him in the grave, then he came out. And when he came out of the grave, they say the mother of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh said, Hani'an lakal Jannah. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, good for you that you will enter Jannah without any problem. And the Prophet stopped the mother of Sa'd, said, wait a second. Ya Sa'd, don't be so sure about that. Ya Rasulullah, why? This is a person, companion of yours, amongst the foremost companions of yours. Why? He should be in heaven, shouldn't he be? And the Prophet said the problem with Sa'd is that yes, he will end up in heaven, but he will be punished severely first because of the bad akhlaq that he had with his relatives and his family members. And he is being punished in the grave because of this bad akhlaq that he had, that he did not repent from before he left this world. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, famous companion of the Prophet, and the Prophet says he will be held accountable for the bad akhlaq that he had. And then beyond that, what we find in our teachings and in our hadith is that there are certain situations where having good akhlaq is not just important, it is critical. Meaning that in these situations, if someone doesn't have proper akhlaq, then what they're doing is terrible. And we will talk about one of those situations. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. Amongst those times where having the best akhlaq is critical, it's not just important, it's not just good, it is critical for a believer to have good akhlaq, is when they are introducing the religion, when they are introducing their school of thought. When it comes to the Shia, and they are a representative of their school of thought, that's when their akhlaq has to be impeccable. Their akhlaq has to be perfect. They have to be able to control their emotions because now they're representing a whole faith. Now whatever they do will be attributed to a whole faith. And this was a lesson that one of the companions of Imam as-Sadiq, even though the Ahlul Bayt taught him this lesson, he did not learn this lesson from the Ahlul Bayt. He had to learn this lesson from one of the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. Who was this? This was an individual by the name of Mufaddal ibn Umar al-Ju'fi, famous companion of the 6th Imam, salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi. They say that one day Mufaddal ibn Umar, he himself narrates. He says, I went to Masjid al-Nabi in Medina. And we know Imam as-Sadiq, that's where he was, even though he had trips outside of Medina, but mainly he was in Medina. He said, I went to Masjid al-Nabi and I sat in front of the grave of the Prophet. And I thought to myself, Ya Rasulullah, what a great heritage and what a great legacy you have left behind. How much service did you do to the Muslim Ummah that we still remember you 5 times a day in our Adhan. And we still remember you every single time we pray. And then we still remember you in everything that we do. And the service that you did for us and how many sacrifices you made for us and so on and so forth. He says, as I was sitting there, and I was thinking about how great the Prophet is and the legacy that he has, he says, then all of a sudden I saw one of the atheists, one of the zanadiqa, meaning an atheist, someone who doesn't believe in God. by the name of Ibn Abil Awja, famous atheist who used to debate Imam al-Sadiq on multiple occasions. He says, all of a sudden, I saw Ibn Abil Awja come and sit not too far away from me. And a little time passed, and his friend came and sat there with him as well. And they started to converse with one another, close enough that I could hear them. They didn't even care that I'm hearing it. And he started to speak to his friend, and all of a sudden, I saw that they're talking about the Prophet all of a sudden. Then they turned to one another. They said, this Muhammad, he tricked everybody. This Muhammad, he was able to trick all of the Arab, and all of the Arab started to follow him. And now everyone believes that he has a book, and this book is from God. And in fact, what he did was that he even put his own name in the adhan, so that now Muslims, when they do the adhan, they will remember him. He wasn't happy with being a king when he was alive. He wanted to make sure that he would be remembered even after he has left this world. And you can tell Umar ibn, Mufaddal ibn Umar, he is hearing this. This is very frustrating for him. He's hearing this, that the enemy of the Ahlul Bayt and the enemy of the Prophet is saying these things about the Prophet. And you can tell that his anger is bubbling up inside of him. And then he says, as I was hearing what Ibn Abil Awja was continuing to say, then they started to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they said, yes, this Muhammad, he tricked people, he deceived people to a point where he got people to think that this world has a creator and that there's this God and you have to worship him. Mufaddal ibn Umar says, the moment I heard these lines, I could no longer take it. Imagine, he's in Masjid al-Nabi. He says, I got up in Masjid al-Nabi and I started to yell at Ibn Abil Awja. And I said, Ya adu Allah, how dare you say this about our Prophet? How dare you accuse him of being a liar? How dare you say that there is no creator? If you just look at your own body, you will realize that there is a creator, and so on and so forth. He says, I continued to yell at him and yell at him. Then he says, Ibn Abil Awja was just waiting. Then when I was done, he turned to me and he said this. He said, Ya Rajul. He said, oh man, because he didn't know who he was. He said, I don't know who you are, but it seems as though you are amongst the ashab of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. It seems as though you're a companion of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Isn't that true? He said, yes, I'm a companion of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. What is it about Ja'far ibn? What does this have to do with Ja'far ibn Muhammad? The fact that you're denying these facts, what does this have to do with Ja'far ibn Muhammad? He said, listen, when we go and we debate with Ja'far ibn Muhammad, your teacher, your master, when we go and we debate with Ja'far ibn Muhammad and we sit with him, he will hear more than what you heard from us today. But he is always calm. He is always collected. He never loses his cool like you do. When we sit with Ja'far ibn Muhammad, we say terrible things to him, but he never swears at us. He never yells at us. He is always calm and collected. And when we see that he is so calm, he is so collected, then we feel like the arguments we are making this time, we're going to be able to defeat him. And that's why we add to our arguments, and we add to our arguments, and we keep going and going, and he never cuts us off until we are done. When we are done, then Ja'far ibn Muhammad, he turns to us, and with a couple of short sentences and statements, he refutes all of our arguments. Ya Rajul, oh man, if you want to debate us and you want to talk about the creation of Allah and the Prophet and all of that, that is fine. I will debate you. Ibn Abil Awja says, he says, I will debate you, but debate me with the akhlaq of Ja'far ibn Muhammad. If you're going to speak to me with the akhlaq that your master and your Imam has. Don't speak to me with this akhlaq that you sit there and you yell. Imagine the embarrassment of Mufaddal ibn Umar al-Ju'fi, that he didn't learn this lesson from Imam al-Sadiq. He didn't learn this lesson of having proper akhlaq from the Ahlul Bayt. He ended up learning this from who? From the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. And this is the akhlaq that you have with the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. Imagine, brothers and sisters, the akhlaq you're supposed to have when it comes to your own brothers and sisters. people who are from the same school of thought as yours, people who are not even from the same school of thought, the same religion as yours. This is why we find in the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, whenever their companions used to curse others, curse in the sense of swearing, yes? The companions of Ali ibn Abi Talib, when they went in one of the battles, I believe it's Siffin if I'm not mistaken, and then they started to swear at the enemy on the other side. They used to use vulgar words, yes? They used to use words that are, I can't mention here. This is different from the concept of la'an and all that kind of stuff. This is different. I'm talking about something else. When they used to use vulgar words and strong language, the Imam told him, I don't like for you to speak in this manner. You can disagree with what someone is doing. You can tell them that what they're doing is wrong, but have the proper akhlaq, have the proper manners when you are speaking to different people. Of course, the concept of la'an and all that is a separate topic that we will discuss some other time, inshallah. But you find that the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt was that whoever you are speaking to, you speak with the utmost respect. You speak with the proper manners. You speak with proper akhlaq to them. And this is when it comes to the Ibn Abil Awjaz of the world. So what is it? What is our duty when it comes to our own brothers and sisters in our own communities? What is our duty when it comes to my own wife, my own child? One of the great scholars, his name is Ayatollah Hasan Zada Amuli, famous scholar of Irfan. He says, I was studying with my teacher one day, and I was going through the studies with him. Allama Sha'arani is his teacher, and Ayatollah Hasan Zada Amuni is still alive at this old age. And he says, as I was going through the studies, one day I came home. And when I came home, I took a nap, and I took a nap in the other room. And, my wife was taking care of the children in the other room, and I went to take a nap so that I could get some rest and continue with my studies. He says, as I was taking my nap, then all of a sudden, these children, they started to make some noise, as children do. You can't control children. You can't stop them from doing things. I mean, they're children. They'll make some noise. He says they continued to make some noise, and I wasn't able to sleep anymore. And he says, I got up and I was harsh in my tone with my children and with my wife. And I turned to my wife. I said, you're supposed to take care of them. Why are they making so much noise? He says, I was harsh with them. He says, then I apologized to my wife and my children. And the next day I went to class. He says, the next day I went to class and my teacher turned to me. He said, do you want to grow spiritually? I said, yes, of course. This is why I attend your classes. This is why I learn the things that I want to learn. He said, but how are you going to grow spiritually when you have that type of akhlaq with your family and your wife and your children? And he knew about it. And he says, my teacher taught me that if I'm going to grow at all, at the end of the day, it comes back to my akhlaq, and specifically the akhlaq that I have in my own household. I've said this before, brothers and sisters. It's easy to have good akhlaq outside. It's easy to have good akhlaq with strangers. It's easy to hold the door when someone is coming outside of a grocery store. It's easy to do that. Why? Because as a stranger, you don't deal with this person. You don't have to be patient with this person. It's easy to have good akhlaq with a coworker, for example. It's not too difficult. It's difficult to have good akhlaq with those that you spend the most time with. That is difficult. And that is where our test is. In this akhlaq, this issue of akhlaq, I will say this and I will move on, inshallah, to the last point that I will make before we end tonight's talk. This issue of akhlaq and the akhlaq that we show in our centers is one of the reasons why some of our youth and even some of our own families do not want to enter and be a part of the centers because of the akhlaq that we show at times, right? And this is not this center or that center. This is a general thing that I'm bringing up. That the akhlaq that we have in our centers, unfortunately, is not the best of akhlaqs. That the moment a child makes some noise, then all of a sudden there are 5 people yelling at this child. Of course, this child is not going to have the best of experiences at the masjid. Yes? The moment something happens and all of a sudden the akhlaq of this person becomes horrible all of a sudden. And sometimes you see this, God forbid, unfortunately, even with speakers even. That the moment one child makes a little bit of noise, then all of a sudden they lose it. Where is this from the seerah and the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt? When did they ever react in this manner? This is the Prophet that when he used to go to the masjid and he used to pray, Hasan and Hussein used to get up on his shoulders. Don't we read this? We read this in the Shia's literature. We also read this in the Sunni literature. Shia and Sunni have narrated this. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari that I'm mentioning to you. That the Prophet remained in sajda for as long as these children were on his shoulders. And when he got up, people asked him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, your sajda took too long today. What happened? What was going on? Is this is this something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to do? He said, no, it wasn't any of that. My child, my grandchildren, and the Prophet used to refer to them as Ibni. My child was on my shoulders. Hasan and Hussein were on my shoulders. I didn't want to bother them. And I stayed in sajda. What does that tell you and me about the way we are to treat our children, the way we are to show respect to our children? All of this will move on, inshallah, to the last point that we will make, and that is this. If I show good akhlaq to somebody, and this is a problem we have in our communities, and I've had so many people ask me this question before. If I show good akhlaq to somebody, and I give my salam to this person and I ask how they're doing and I try to have good akhlaq with them, but this person in return is very cold. This person in return does not show me this good akhlaq. What am I supposed to do? What is my duty at this point? What should I do with regard to this person? In Islam, Islam will give you at least two points we will talk about. First of all, the minimal level of good akhlaq should always remain there. Meaning that if this person is cold, if this person is bad, if this person doesn't respond to your salam, at the very minimal level, a simple salam and a simple how are you doing, that should always remain with you. Doesn't matter who you're dealing with. This person doesn't respond to your salam, no problem. Let them not respond to the salam. That's their problem, that's not your problem. The minimal level of good akhlaq. This person is cold, you try to have good akhlaq with them, but they don't show the same good akhlaq, no problem. You give them a simple salam and you move on because this person has this bad akhlaq that he has. There's no problem. You do your duty and the rest is on him. If he doesn't want to have proper akhlaq towards you, okay, that's fine. That's the first point. The second point, and with this inshallah I will end. The second point is this, that when someone doesn't show good akhlaq to you, do not jump to conclusions as it relates to their intentions. What do I mean by this? Sometimes someone doesn't have good akhlaq, and you see that they're cold, and you see that they don't have good akhlaq, and there's no problem in acknowledging that this person did not show the good akhlaq to me, no problem. But then you start to think about their intentions. Yes, they didn't have good akhlaq with me today because they hate me. They didn't have good akhlaq with me today because they want to get back at me. They didn't have good akhlaq today because they're trying to get revenge. And sometimes you will hear, brothers or sisters, and sometimes more so sisters, they will say, no, when she said this, this is what she meant. And then when she said this, this is what she meant. We don't have the right to judge the intentions of individuals. We don't have that right. Yes, you have the right to look at the fact that this person did not have the good akhlaq with you. No problem. You can say this person did not have good akhlaq with me, but you can't jump from that to intentions because you're not aware of their intentions. And the more you jump from their bad akhlaq to their intentions, the more this is distancing yourself from that person. The more this relationship is getting cut off, because there's a difference between me knowing a person likes me, but they have bad akhlaq. Sometimes they're not on the best of akhlaq. That's one thing. It's another thing for me to sit in front of somebody and say, this person hates my guts. These are two different things. And many times you will find that we will jump to conclusions with regards to the intentions of a person. I have seen, and I've had this personal experience myself, brothers and sisters, that 6 months, a year, a person will be very cold with you. But then when you actually look into the life of this person, you find that this person, it wasn't that they hated you. Sometimes it was because personally they had a lot of problems that they were going through. They were going through hell in their personal life. And so when they come into the center or they're spending time with you, they're not on the best of their akhlaq because they have so many other things to worry about. They have so many other problems that they're dealing with. Doesn't justify their bad akhlaq. It just shows that they didn't hate you. Sometimes you will have this experience. A person will have bad akhlaq. Why? And I'll tell you this from my own personal experience. I've been in situations where a person has had very bad akhlaq with me. Why? Because they've had terrible experiences with some other scholars, with some other people who've worn this clothing. And so the moment they saw me, they thought that, this person is, just like some of the other ones, for example, God forbid, who wear this clothing and don't have the proper akhlaq and don't care for people and so on. And so this person had bad akhlaq. But was it because he hated me? No, it wasn't because he hated me. It's because he had a bad interaction with other people and he assumed things about me. And he's not justified in that bad akhlaq. But at the end of the day, he doesn't hate me. Jumping from the bad akhlaq to the intention and judging the intention of this person, we are not allowed to do that. And these are the points that we have to keep in mind. When we show good akhlaq to someone, but that person does not show the good akhlaq in return to us. This is something, brothers and sisters, that we find happening very often in our communities, unfortunately. This is something that we find happens more than once or twice, where a person shows good akhlaq, but in return, they do not receive the good akhlaq that they have shown to that individual. With that, inshallah, I will bring the talk of tonight slowly to an end. Let us take our hearts, brothers and sisters, to the city of Medina, where our brothers and the beloved Prophet of ours, salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi, is taking the final breaths of his life. You can imagine that the city of Medina is now turning into a city of sadness, of grief. And I will share with you a narration that Ali ibn Abi Talib has mentioned for us from these last moments of the life of the Prophet. He says, I was there in those last moments when the life of the Prophet was coming to an end. His illness and his sickness was becoming very, very severe. He says, at this point, the Prophet was in his house and his head was on my chest. He could barely raise his head anymore. And he says that in these moments, the house was full of people who were there to visit the Prophet. And Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, was there, and I was there as well. And the narration says that the Prophet turned to Abbas, his uncle. He said, my uncle Abbas, will you take my wealth and pay off my debts and be my wasi amongst my relatives? Will you be the one who takes care of my family after me? And Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, said, Ya Rasulullah, you ask someone else to take care of this. And the Prophet then turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, Ya Ali, I'm leaving this world. Will you be my wasi in my family? Will you take care of my relatives? And he says that then the Prophet, when he mentioned this, it was so difficult for me to hear the Prophet speaking of his own death in his own words, even though I knew the Prophet was leaving this world. But now I was hearing it from the Prophet himself. He says, when I heard it in this way, it became so difficult for me that I started to cry. Imagine the face of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the tears start to roll down the face of Ali ibn Abi Talib in these final moments. He says, I continued to cry and cry until a point came where I could barely speak anymore. And the Prophet asked me again, he said, Ya Ali, will you be my wasi? And he says, I could barely get this one word out. And I said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. Then he said, Ya Ali, ijlisni, have me sit up. And he says, I helped the Prophet to sit up. And the Prophet turned to his relatives. He said, after me, after I am gone, listen to Ali and obey Ali and do not become an enemy of Ali and do not give him a hard time. Then he turned to me and he asked Bilal to bring his sword and his armor and his animals, and he had all of these passed on to me as his wasi. And then these are the difficult moments for Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, then the Prophet turned to Bilal. He said, Bilal, go and ask Hasan and Hussein to come to me. These final moments, I want to say my farewell to Hasan and Hussein. And he says, I had the Prophet lie down on the ground because of the pain that he was going through. And then he says, Hasan and Hussein came, and the Prophet took them and embraced them and brought them closer and nearer to himself. And he started to cry, and he became even more sad. Ali ibn Abi Talib says, I saw how sad the Prophet had become. I thought to myself, let me take Hasan and Hussein away. They are making the Prophet too sad. They're bringing too much grief to the Prophet. He says, as I got up to take Hasan and Hussein away, then all of a sudden the Prophet said, no, let them stay here because I want to embrace them and kiss them and smell the scent of Hasan and Hussein for the final time in my life. Let me take from them anything that I can in these final moments. As Ali ibn Abi Talib sits there and the Prophet continues to embrace Hasan and Hussein, and he told Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ya Ali, let me embrace them now because the moment I'm gone, later on these two children of mine, they will go through a difficulty and they will go through a musibat that is so difficult for them. Let them be safe in my embrace in these final moments at least. Ya Rasulullah, we know you were speaking of the 10th of Muharram. We know you were speaking of that day where Hussein ibn Ali, he comes to embrace his own child. He comes to embrace his own Ali al-Asghar. According to some narrations, they say that Imam al-Hussein, when he came to the tents, after everyone had gone to the battlefield, he came to the tents and he was looking for his Ali. He turned to Zainab. He said, Ya Zainab, nawilini waladi Ali. Give me my son Ali al-Asghar. Imagine the heart of the mother of Ali al-Asghar. Imagine how worried she is in these moments, how concerned she is in these moments. Ya Hussein, why do you want Ali? According to some narrations, he said, I just want to say goodbye to Ali. I want to do tawdi' of Ali. I want to say my final farewell. I'm going to go to the battlefield. I just want to kiss Ali al-Asghar one last time. And the narrations say, the moment Hussein picked up Ali al-Asghar and he started to kiss Ali al-Asghar, فَجَعَلَ يُقَبِّلُهُ, he was kissing Ali al-Asghar. Then all of a sudden, the arrow of Harmala enters the neck of Ali al-Asghar. Just imagine what goes through the heart of Hussein on this day. Imagine what went through the heart of Zainab, the heart of Ramla, the mother of Rubab, the mother of Ali al-Asghar in these moments. How difficult was this moment for a mother to watch her own infant in the hands of his father? They say the blood started to gush out of the neck of Ali al-Asghar. It started to pool in the hands of Hussein. And Hussein took this blood and he threw it in the air. And then Imam al-Sadiq says that not one drop of this blood returned back to the earth. And Hussein then turned to Allah, the one person that he can rely on. He says, Ya Allah, hawwana alay. It is only possible for me to take the pain of watching my Ali al-Asghar in these moments because this is in your presence and you can see it. Otherwise, which father can take the pain of watching their 6-month-old being slaughtered in front of them? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of our brothers and sisters who are sick and ill, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them health and afiyah, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are dealing with difficulties and calamities, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberates them from their difficulties, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam, bin Nabi wa alih, rahimallahu man qara al-Fatihata ma'a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. कर गए क़ज़ा शाह अंबिया, कर गए क़ज़ा शाह अंबिया, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा, कर गए क़ज़ा शाह अंबिया, कर गए क़ज़ा शाह अंबिया, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा, वा मोहम्मदा वा मुसीबता है, वा मोहम्मदा वा मुसीबता हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। हाय जल्द क्या चल बसे रसूल, रोती है बतूल बादिले मलूल। हाय जल्द क्या चल बसे रसूल, रोती है बतूल बादिले मलूल। हाथ मलते हैं शाह लापता है, हाथ मलते हैं शाह लापता हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। कहते हैं हसन बादिले महान, कीजिए सुकान या शहे जमान। सुनिए तो जरा शोर है ये क्या, हाय सुनिए तो जरा शोर है ये क्या, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। हाय नाना जान का है लब बैन, रोते रोते गश कर गए हुसैन। अहले बैत में हश्र है बपा, हाय अहले बैत में हश्र है बपा हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। खुल्द को गए शाह बहरोबर, टुकड़े क्यों ना हो नन्ना साजी गए। कम सीनी में हाय दाग ये मिला है, कम सीनी में हाय दाग ये मिला हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। फातिमा बखैर शाह का हुआ और उजड़ गया घर भरा हुआ है मदीने में गुल यही बपा है मदीने में गुल है यही बपा हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। पूछता है जो क्या है सैयदा, रो के कहती है पूछते हो क्या, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा है, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। रोक ले कलम हिल्मिए हजी, थर थराते हैं कुर्सियों जमी, खाक उड़ाते हैं रोके मुर्तजा है, खाक उड़ाते हैं रोके मुर्तजा हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। कर गए कज़ा शाह अंबिया, हो गई यतीम आज फातिमा। या हुसैन या हुसैन
या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन। ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई। सज्जाद को ज़ईफ़ सदाएं ये कर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई। लाशों को रस्सियों में जकड़ कर लिए फिरो, लाशों को रस्सियों में जकड़ कर लिए फिरो। सैदानियां तो घर से निकलते ही मर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई। गोदों से राह शाम में गिर गिर के मर गए, गोदों से राह शाम में गिर गिर के मर गए। बच्चों के लाश देख के माए भी मर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों किरदाएं उतर गई। अंगारे फेंकता था कोई पानी खोलता, अंगारे फेंकता था कोई पानी खोलता। अब्बा से बावफा तेरी बहनें जिधर गई, अब्बा से बावफा तेरी बहनें जिधर गई। ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन।
ज़ियारत सैयद शुहदा अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दुल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न रसूलिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न अमीरुल मोमिनीन व इब्न सय्यदिल वसीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न फातिमत Az-Zahra सय्यदतन निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम साइरी शुहदाए करबला, खुसूसन सय्यदी मौलाय अबुल फज़ल अब्बास इब्न अमीरुल मोमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या गरीबल गुरबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मुइनल दुअफा वल फुक़रा, अस्सलामु अलैका या सुल्तान या अबुल हसन या अली इब्न मूसा अय्युहर रिज़ा, अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या साहिबल असर व ज़मान, अस्सलामु अलैका या शरीकल कुरआन, अस्सलामु अलैका या इमाम अल इंस वल जान, अज्जलल्लाहु तआला फरजक व सअलल्लाहु तआला मखरजक व ज़हूरक। अस्सलामु अलैका व अला आबाइका तय्यबीन अत्ताहिरीन। अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद।
Inshallah. Just a reminder, Dua Tawassul on Tuesday at 8:30, Dua on Thursday, 8 o'clock, inshallah. Salaam alaikum. Khuda Hafiz.